I thought I was like knocked out for a couple of seconds.
A young woman who was sitting in the back seat of Dustin Camp's car testified at the trial that as Camp drove, he said, "I'm a ninja in my caddy." Oles says that by the time he got up, Camp was gunning for Brian Deneke. Chris Oles watched helplessly as Dustin Camp ran over his friend.
They just sucked him right under, and it didn't stop at all, and they kind of drug him a little bit. But what the sick thing was, man, whenever he hit him, all these kids started cheering. You know, that was the most eerie thing about the whole thing, you know.
After Deneke was crushed, the preps scattered, running for their cars and pickup trucks. The punks gathered around Brian Deneke, Jason, Brian's older brother, crying inconsolably as he cradled Brian's head in his lap. Since the night Brian Deneke was killed, Dustin Camp has never spoken publicly about what happened. But Dustin's parents defend their son's actions that night.
They just went out for an honest fist fight, and they got jumped by a game.
Debbie Camp and her husband Mike are not among Amarillo's privileged elite. They run a successful auto repair shop. Their son Dustin, however, was a popular athlete at Tascosa High School, co-captain of the junior varsity football team. The crowd Dustin hung out with included children of some of Amarillo's leading citizens, and the Camps were proud of their son's success. Debbie Camp says that when Dustin ran over Brian Deneke, her son was defending his friends, something they say he was taught to do.
Dustin is fiercely loyal.
Easier just call a bunch of bullies.
We're
Have
so
some more
proud of
popular
him.
names. That's what they are everywhere these days. We call
The
them bullies.
courage it took.
They go after the people that are different, right? The ones with the long
to
pants hanging down.
take care of his
They go
friends,
after the
so he
evils,
became
the punk
leader of his
rockers, the
group.
gays.
Dustin was just
Otherwise,
trying
doesn't
to
have the high class
defend
big trucks,
himself
their nice
and
rich
the other
cars.
boys and
No, they
get out of
target
there.
them. They target,
the
you know,
punk, the
otherwise
Camps feel
people that ain't
nothing
like
but
them, you
disgust.
know.
They like
Gotta
to
be
humiliate
up there like
people.
they are, you know, or they'll go after you.
They like for people to look at them
Harvard's
and be
just not
shocked by
teaching
their
enough in our
appearance.
schools anymore.
I think they're
And it's
just
very
about
sad.
drugs. I think they're about alcohol. I think they're about Satanism. I think they're about sexual deviance. They don't bathe.
For the punks in Amarillo, they say this kind of hostility is an ongoing part of their existence. Jessica Jackson is a shy 19-year-old who speaks with a hushed voice. Jackson has 3 rings in her nose, 3 in her lower lip, 2 studs in her tongue, and pins through her cheeks.
I never really fit in anywhere else, and I didn't really care about what clothes I was wearing or how much money my parents made or anything like that. I just wanted to be myself and do what I wanted to do, and then I found a group of people that were doing that. Like the people I met were all into punk rock. I really didn't have many friends in high school.
The sparsely populated panhandle of Texas has always been a tough place to be different. Here, cowboys in blue jeans and boots, or young men who play football, are the ones who get looked up to. Although the punk look will attract attention anywhere, in Amarillo it made Brian Deneke and his friends targets. The punks all say they get harassed when they walk around Amarillo, and occasionally the abuse goes beyond words. Beer bottles thrown at their heads out of moving vehicles, beatings. When asked, they say it doesn't matter that other young people are abusive to them. But the pain in Jessica Jackson's voice when she describes the insults seems real enough.
People always tell me, actually, just like free, people call me faggot and just lame stuff.
Among the punks in Amarillo, Brian Deneke was a leader. He arranged for punk bands to come to town, sometimes paying out of his own pocket to do so. Jessica Jackson says Deneke had a charisma that made him the center of the punk scene.
He was probably one of the most outgoing people I met. He was like probably the least judging of everybody. He was real nice to everybody, and if somebody new showed up, then he would sit down and talk to them and just talk about music and what they liked and what they listened to, and if they'd ever heard a certain band, and he'd play music for people, and he was real friendly.
Deneke's nickname was Sunshine, but he got beaten up so often that his friends had another nickname for him, Fist Magnet. It seemed to be all about his punk look, his mohawk, his leather jacket, the spiked dog collar he liked to wear around his neck. Brian's father, Mike Deneke, says they would sometimes get a call from their son after he'd been assaulted.
There was one night that he had called, it was a little later in the evening, he'd been out on his skateboard, and some guys in a pickup truck had jumped him and beat him up. We went over there and we took him to the emergency room for that.
Mike Deneke did not like the way his son dressed one bit, but his love for his son eventually trumped his anger over Brian's punk look.
We got to where we accepted, you know, we realized that he was a good person, and rather than fighting him, constantly battling him, we came to realize that, you know, we could either do that and drive him away, or we could accept him as the person he was, and he would be here, be around.
But if Deneke's father came to accept the way his son looked, he was in the minority. When Dustin Camp went to court for killing Deneke, Camp's defense lawyer, Warren Clark, put the victim, his friends, and the punk look on trial. Clark called the punks goons and pure naked aggressors, and said their way of life was based on intimidating others and defying authority. His clients, in polo shirts and button-down collars, were described as good kids who were only trying to defend themselves from an armed gang. Clark's strategy worked. Dustin Camp was convicted, not of first-degree murder, but manslaughter. And instead of going to prison, the jury gave Camp 10 years probation, allowing him to go free. The trial judge sealed the jury list forever, and the case was over, but not the public reaction. On Amarillo's KGNC, it was evident that the verdict split the town in two.
George, thank you for waiting. You're with us on KGNC Open Line.
I'm ashamed of what's happening here in my town. They run over the boy.
James Hunt has been the host of his own talk radio show in Amarillo for the last 10 years. He says that there are many people in Amarillo who are angry about the verdict. Some are supportive of the punks. Many others are simply against letting anyone who's killed someone else go free. And Hunt says there are plenty of callers who support the verdict, too, saying Camp acted in self-defense.
If you strip this down to the most minimum detail and you say a punk got killed by a prep and the prep didn't go to prison, bad city, that Amarillo. I think for a lot of people, those who think the verdict was a good verdict, the key point for them was there was a fight going on.
Hunt says his callers are split 60-40, with the majority opposed to the jury sentence. With the verdict now attracting the attention of national news media, some of the city's leaders, like Mayor Kel Seliger, worry that Amarillo will be depicted unfairly as a hick town. In books and newspaper accounts, the Texas Panhandle has sometimes been described as a desolate place full of backward, if colorful, people. Mayor Seliger says that the Deneke killing could have happened anywhere.
When they say that people muttered the epithets at them that they did and that people would honk at them on the street, I believe every word of it. Is that any different than the way athletes talk to, once again, the people we called hippies in the 60s, and that gays are treated in lots of cities? No. And that's the way adolescents treat differences. I think it is behavior that is not any more characteristic of young people in Amarillo than it is any other American city.
In fact, in two of the nation's recent school shootings, in Paducah, Kentucky, and Littleton, Colorado, this kind of peer-on-peer persecution played a role. For example, at Columbine High School, while on their rampage, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold specifically called out for anyone wearing a baseball cap to stand up so they could shoot them. Friends of the two killers later said that some athletes at Columbine had made their lives miserable. And Mayor Seliger raises another painful question that springs from the Amarillo tragedy. What if it had been the other way around? What if